players in the Hall of Fame that was on teams and they need to be in systems. They couldn't take another team if they was by themselves to the playoffs, right? I wasn't that guy. That's why I couldn't stay in San Antonio. I knew I could be better elsewhere. They put you in positions, and it's only a certain 1 or 2 players that they're gonna allow to be that. You know what I'm saying? And in my case, it was Tony, Manu, and Tim. Tim rightfully, Tim don't even count. But Manu and Tony, some days I was way nicer than them a lot of nights, right? But in situations like that, we talk about DeRozan and DeJounte.
Yep.
They've been held back.
So in this video we saw, the title of the video is Why Playing for the Spurs is Like Playing or Being in Jail, right? Steven Jackson is talking about his time with San Antonio, and well, there are some system players, and the people who thrive in systems are not necessarily players who can thrive outside of systems. And he was a player who didn't need the system, right? And he could thrive outside of the system. So comparing this, playing this on the Spurs to being like jail, and why DeRozan, DeJounte Murray, Kawhi Leonard needed to get out. So obviously I disagree. I disagree to a larger extent. And let's put everything in context, right? He also talks about Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. We're going to bring that up as well. Steven Jackson started off on the New Jersey Nets. It didn't work out. Team didn't want him. He didn't want to be there. Spurs pick him up. And in, I believe, his first year with the Spurs, in his second or third year in the NBA, he wins a championship as a systems player, right? That offseason comes up, and the Spurs and Steven Jackson can't come to terms. So he goes, I believe it was to Atlanta before Indiana. We'll have to check that. My point would be, how many more championships did you win after you left the Spurs? And the answer is none, 0, right? Did your stats go up a little bit? Absolutely. But the question is, why are you playing the game? Why you play the game as an individual is very different than why the team brings you onto the team, right? Why does the GM and coach bring you onto the team? It's because they're playing for championships, and they're wanting to fit the right pieces into this complex puzzle, right? So he bounces around, and I hate to say it like that. Steven Jackson is truthfully one of my favorite players. He's always been one of my favorite players. But this is one of the gripes I have with him. This like love-hate relationship with the Spurs, and it's mostly love. It's mostly love, so let's get that out of the way. He has praised Pop, he's praised the Spurs, but then it's in situations like this where it's a little confusing, right? So you bounce around, and then towards the tail end of your career, you got about 4 or 5 years left. You're finishing up your tenure with the Golden State Warriors, and you know you're on the bench. The Warriors are looking to trade you. The Spurs trade Richard Jefferson for you. And what do you automatically do? You're a role player, and you fit your role perfectly. You guys make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals. You guys get up 2-0, and then you lose 4 straight to the OKC Thunder, right? A lot of people, including myself, think that the officiating in that series was very off and questionable. It's one of the few series that I've seen receive so much criticism, not even online, on public platforms. Even people on ESPN were discussing how biased the officiating was during that series, okay? So my point is this. It's always been in the system that Steven Jackson has thrived. Always, period, point blank. You look at Atlanta, when he was there, he was putting up numbers. They didn't go anywhere. When he was in Indiana, they had a bona fide chance of making it to the finals and probably playing against the Spurs. What happened? Palace and the Malice. You need to keep your players in check. You need to have a good structure. You need to have a good leader, right? There's a reason I would say Steven Jackson would get out of hand at times with other teams and other coaches, but you didn't really see that with San Antonio. Now, he brought up Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker. I disagree, right? You said that on some nights, I forgot the terminology he used, on some nights he brought more to the table or he was producing more. Yeah, on some nights. It's not about what you do on some nights. It's about what you can do every night. What can I depend on? What can I expect as a coach from you on a day-to-day basis? Not only on the court, off the court. What you do off the court is going to impact what you're able to do on the court if you get suspended, right? So I think with Tony and Manu, they were more dependable, right? Number 2, I love Steven Jackson. I love Steven Jackson. His mantra, I make love to pressure. Very true. Even in that series I referenced against OKC, hitting big 3 after big 3. But there were the rumors that you were jaw-jacking or you're going at it with players in practice. And if we know what we know about the Spurs, especially about Tony and Manu, these are guys who are probably not going back and forth with you, right? So, and that might, from certain cultures and cultural differences, that might be looked upon as weak. Oh, okay, those guys are weak. I don't think it's weak. I think it's discipline. They come from that foreign background where you respect and you listen to the coach at to a very far extent. And I'm not saying that's always a good thing or a right thing, but it is their culture, right? And we know the Spurs won 4 championships each with Manu and Tony Parker. We have Manu, who's a multiple-time Sixth Man of the Year. Tony Parker, Finals MVP in the system. And I disagree that that in other systems they would not be who they are. I think in other systems, these guys are multiple-time All-Stars. They're averaging 20 to 30 points a game. We could see that these guys could score, but they played within a system. They had to pick their spots. So I disagree with that. I also disagreed with using DeMar DeRozan as an example. Look, DeMar DeRozan is that dude. I'm from Chicago. He's that dude, right? In Toronto, he was that dude. Never won a championship. Never made it to the finals. In San Antonio, he had him and LaMarcus Aldridge. I love both those players. I love anybody who's willing to come to San Antonio and stay in San Antonio. What's the problem? These guys, as we say in boxing, they're not the A side, in my opinion. They are starters. They are all-stars. They're not your number one option, in my opinion. You need to have a lot of talent around them to make sure that their teams can go far. The one point that I will give Steven Jackson is with LaMarcus Aldridge, but I don't think he even referenced LaMarcus Aldridge. There was a point where LaMarcus was, I believe, finishing his second year with the Spurs, and he asked for a trade. He asked for a trade because he was not fitting the offensive scheme and system. And he did it in a very humble way. He said, look, this isn't working out. I guess I'm not good enough for the system. And Pop was like, whoa, this guy's a bona fide 25-point-a-night scorer in the league. Maybe I'm, as a head coach, doing something wrong. Let me reevaluate what I could be potentially doing wrong, and let me loosen the reins a little bit. And he did, and the relationship worked out. Now, if we're going to say they didn't, both those players didn't score the same amount as they did in their previous teams, or they didn't win at the highest level, they didn't win because they weren't the best team. Clear, right? They didn't have the most talent, and they were not the best team. Okay, so let's get that out of the way. They also have not won since they left the Spurs, right? So DeMar has not been winning on the Bulls, right? I'm a Bulls fan. They did really good last year, but when they lost Lonzo, they lost a lot of momentum, and they got bounced, I believe, in the first or second round. LaMarcus Aldridge had to retire, came back, and then they didn't win with the Nets. Okay, but Pop maximizes, and it's like an orange, and you're squeezing as much juice as you can out of the orange. Pop will always maximize talent out of players. That's why Pop has his reputation. That's why Pop can take older players and rejuvenate them. Okay? So I do not agree with the example that the Spurs are like a prison. I do believe that you have to have a system to win for most teams, and there are only a few exceptions to that. But if you're a small market team like San Antonio, where players do not want to come to play with you, players do not want to live in San Antonio. They want to live in Chicago, New York, Miami, Boston, Los Angeles. They don't want to come to San Antonio. So what Pop is going to do, what RC is going to do, they're going to look for talent that fit their blueprint. They don't want no drama, right? Because this is, as someone who is now getting back into coaching, you don't want to worry about off-court drama. You want to worry about coaching. You want to worry about X's and O's. You want to worry about player development. There's a bias against San Antonio. They're already at a disadvantage where they're not meant to win. And in a situation as a small market team where they're not meant to win, and they've won in 3 decades with the same coach, impressive, okay? So that's my reflection on this video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and perhaps we'll make another video. Walaway.